Hello, my name is Sergio Morero, and today we're here at RBL1 Live with Marcus Shaw. He's CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the CO.LAB, or CO.LAB, based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The CO.LAB is a nonprofit startup accelerator that supports entrepreneurial growth in the Southeast Tennessee. So thanks for joining us, Marcus.
Sergio, thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. So a little bit for the audience those that don't know Marcus. So he formerly of IBM and Bank of America, also worked at MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow, where I'm an MBA fellow, an alumni of, and a great organization. He is a graduate of Morehouse College, Georgia Institute of Technology, and then also got his MBA at Duke University. So busy guy. Glad you're able to join us tonight. And he is an ecosystem builder in the Southeast and is going to share his journey with us today. So to kick it off, can you share a little bit more about the CO.LAB?
So the CO.LAB is a startup development organization, or an entrepreneurial support organization based in Chattanooga. We run programs that help not only high growth companies through our accelerator programs, we also work with community companies and local small businesses to help them grow as well. One of the things that's unique about a place like Chattanooga, and there are hundreds of cities like it across the country, is that not only do we need the type of economic development that comes from big businesses that are venture backed and have the ability to scale and support hundreds of jobs, but we also work with the small mom and pop businesses that support 5 and 10 jobs at a time and really are the fabric of a small business community. And so it's exciting to be a part of the large work that we do that supports big capital raises and the type of work that gets all the headlines. But it's also incredibly fun to work with entrepreneurs that you see every day. You buy coffee, or you go to their restaurants, or you go to their dry cleaner. And so that's a big part of the fun too.
Great. And I took a look. I know I have a friend that works at CO.LAB, and I know you have a number of different programs for. Can you talk a little bit about who you serve? Like what types of people should come to CO.LAB, and what types of programs and services you offer?
Fantastic. So our accelerator programs, which are geared for high growth companies that are going to serve large end markets, we really focus on places that we believe Chattanooga and our region and our networks can deliver a competitive advantage. And there are 4 key industries where we think we have a competitive advantage, not only because we have experts in those areas, but also because those people are very accessible. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but the 4 areas are healthcare, which is our health tech accelerator; consumer goods, which ranges from everything from food and beverage to other CPG products, and there's some history in Chattanooga there. We also do work in smart cities. Chattanooga has the fastest internet in the country, and we've had some recent good news about bridging the digital divide with our incredible asset. People in Chattanooga can get up to 10 gig service. And so that supports a really strong platform in terms of energy, in terms of healthcare, and in terms of mobility. So we focus on smart city things that allow people to live better lives. And then we also are the #1 freight and trucking kind of metropolis on a per capita basis in the country. Almost any truck that goes through the southeast part of the country is coming through Chattanooga. And so I like to think of that freight industry as kind of our cottage industry. It's maybe media and entertainment in LA or finance in New York, but in Chattanooga, folks know a lot about trucking and logistics.
That's great. And are you open to, when you say your companies focus on those areas, can it be companies that are outside looking to relocate, or is it primarily entrepreneurs in Tennessee and the region?
So no, we are open to anybody that's willing to come to Chattanooga and believe that they can grow their company there. They don't have to be there permanently, but we love for people to come enjoy Chattanooga and build a business there, or build part of their business there, utilizing the resources that we have.
Great. And before we dive more deeper into the Chattanooga ecosystem, can you share can you share with us a little bit more about your journey? How did you end up? I know recently before this you spent several years in the Washington D.C. ecosystem, and
That's
then
right.
most recently with Management Leadership for Tomorrow, and then ended up going to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which it seemed like you hadn't been before. So, what can you share a little bit of your journey? As you could start as far back as IBM, or but I'll leave it up to you if you can share. How did you end up being CEO of the company lab?
It's a great question. I'm going to start back in 1988. No, I'm kidding. But that was
You could, you could.
1988. I will bookmark this. 1988 was the first time I went to Chattanooga. And if you can believe, 32 years ago, it was a much different place. And so that did set a little bit of a baseline for what I thought the city was going to be like. My brother-in-law moved down there in 2004, and so my family and I have been down there, several times over the past few years. But what really set us in motion going to Chattanooga, and I'll talk a little bit about my path. But what set us in motion is what I think sets a lot of folks in motion, which is a spouse who's much smarter and brighter than me. Got a tremendous opportunity down in Chattanooga, and we took the family down there and said, let's see what we can do. And the rest is history. I would definitely say my background, this was not the obvious choice, right? Moving to Chattanooga, I started out as an engineer coming out of Georgia Tech, working with IBM, worked all over the country, setting up WAN LAN networks. And about 3 years after that, decided that I wanted to learn a little bit more about how some of these deals were put together, and did what I think a lot of people do. And you went through MLT. I predate being an MLT fellow by 1 year, just showing a little bit of my age, but uh, really looked at my boss's resume and looked at what he had done and some of the things he had accomplished. And it seemed like getting an MBA would be a great thing to do, right? It's a good compliment for an engineer. And so I went to business school at Duke and fell in love with finance there, and started realizing that a lot of the things that I learned in as an engineer were applicable to the world of finance, right? Like the law of thermodynamics and Black-Scholes are much more similar than somebody would think. So heat transfer and derivative trading are related, except you could potentially make a lot more money going to Wall Street. And so I went off to Wall Street and served as an equity research analyst at Bank of America for a number of years. Then left there and went to a fund and managing direct money for pension funds and unions and all of those institutional investors, and then went back to DC, my hometown, and set up shop leading a research team at a broker dealer in DC that worked really in the political intelligence realm. And that was exciting. And then, like a lot of people, you have a life altering incident, right, in terms of health, and decided I wanted to do something that would allow me to be with a greater sense of community. And MLT, I had a number of mentees that I recommended to MLT. Folks like yourself that go through that program are some of the brightest people in the world, and had an opportunity to go there and help MLT raise some money, leading business development there, and just had such an incredible time building those relationships with corporations. I'd covered companies for a long time as an equity research analyst, and I was working with them, helping build their diversity pipelines, and saw a lot of incredible talent out there, and thought more and more about what entrepreneurship could look like. I kind of back-ended my way into entrepreneurship by investing in some early stage companies directly. And that is a fun lesson to learn. You can learn the easy way or the hard way. I think I did it a little bit of both, Sergio, as you know. If only I had Venture University out when I was a young man, it would have been
So
a little.
Rebel that you could join Rebel One and learn investing. So that's the key.
That's what I needed before I had all of these gray hairs, right? Um, I so I could have saved myself a few dollars. But what I saw in Chattanooga was an incredible ecosystem that had incredible companies and really an incredible community built around it. And that's the unique thing about Chattanooga. And so being able to be a part of that was special. And utilize some of the gifts that I have to try to move it to the next level. I think everybody in our ecosystem is always about how do we advance the ball? How do we use our networks and our skill sets to advance the ball a little bit further? And the community has done an incredible job really over the last 10 years in kind of our modern entrepreneurial ecosystem era.
No, that's great. I appreciate you're our first guest from Tennessee, let alone Chattanooga. So, appreciate. Can you share a little bit more about? I mean, you mentioned your focus areas, the healthcare, the trucking. You mentioned a little some elements that make Chattanooga unique, the fastest internet
Yeah.
in speed in the country. Can you elaborate on that? What makes Chattanooga a great place to either start or come to as entrepreneurs are thinking about innovating?
So there's two answers, I think, to that question, or two facets, right? Um, One is the technical aspect, which are things like industries that we have a legacy of having some competitive advantage in, like trucking, and certainly on a per capita basis, healthcare. We're in between two of the largest healthcare markets in the country, in Nashville and Atlanta. But in Chattanooga, you've got the seventh largest public hospital in the country, in Erlanger Health Systems, a great partner of ours. The largest disability insurance broker in the world in Unum, another great partner of ours, and the largest health insurance company in the state of Tennessee is also headquartered there, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. And here's the thing: they're within a half a mile walking of each other, right? So the cross pollination that you have in that type of community really allows for you to develop some core strengths in health tech and allow you to leverage that network in a unique way, right? Much different than what you can do in the Bay or in New York. Again, tons of resources in those cities, but the friction that entrepreneurs often encounter when trying to meet all of the different people and put those things together, there's a lot less friction in Chattanooga. And so the technical aspects of it are places where you have industry strength, incredible infrastructure through the gig, right? So if you're running an application or a company that requires high bandwidth, low latency networks, you're not going to find infrastructure anywhere in the country that's better than what EPB has provided through the gig. And then there's kind of the softer things, right, which I alluded to before, which is it is truly a community built on public-private partnerships. And so, things like foundations and corporate entities and city government and county government and even state government really work seamlessly together in Chattanooga. And so working in that type of an ecosystem creates a lot more opportunities from what you have to work with than what people find in many other regions.
That's amazing. How did and I would have never have thought of the fastest internet. Can you share? Do you know a little bit about how that came to be? Some of the infrastructure investments that Tennessee has been making or the city has been making in the area.
So I'll tell you the story. This one doesn't go back to 1988. This one actually goes to 2009, the Great Recession, right? And I think I'll preface this by saying, like every entrepreneur, I think cities that are able to make investments at the very bottom of a market when things are looking like they can't get worse, but are positioned right with the capital and with the relationships to invest money to increase access and capabilities of their community, that's where you get kind of that rocket ship, right? And we see that with companies all the time. I think the same thing exists for ecosystems. In 2009, right as we're basically coming out of the Great Recession, right, and things are looking bleak, but they're starting to look a little bit better. EPB, the Electric Power Board, and full disclosure, I'm on the board there, right? So, but EPB has cash on the balance sheet and is able to get some capital from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, right, under President Obama, and invest hundreds of millions of dollars to modernize the smart grid infrastructure. So when your power goes off, in many cities, you'll be without power for hours, right? And it could be 8, 9, 10 hours you're without power. EPB said, look, we want to modernize the grid so that people will only be without power for seconds. That the way the electric grid works in Chattanooga is it's almost switches like a telephony network, right? So if your power goes down, say for like a transformer exploding, if your power goes down at your house, the network will realize that the power is down and will reroute your electricity through another route in order to get you power back very, very quickly. And so they enable this network by laying fiber optic cables to every home and business that they provided electric service to. Well, what we know is that set up the community to have broadband to every home, skipping no homes, right? Every home that they provide electricity to was now technically set up to receive broadband through a fiber point-to-point fiber network, which was faster by capability than any other network in the country. And so they actually turned that network up, and it became PPP fiber optics. Why do I think this is so important? Because last week, in the middle of another crisis, right, the next crisis after the Great Recession, at EPB, we said, well, how do we help people manage through this crisis? What can we do? And so we worked with the Hamilton County Schools, and great superintendent there, Brian Johnson, a good friend. We worked with Jim Coppinger, the mayor of the county, Hamilton County, and Mayor Andy Burke, the mayor of the city of Chattanooga, along with a number of foundations, private foundations in Chattanooga, and Blue Cross Blue Shield through their foundation, to actually put together a package which would deliver free internet to free and reduced lunch kids for the next 10 years.
That's
Because
amazing.
what we saw when they went out of school in March is the kids that didn't have access to the internet were not positioned to perform in this environment, right? And so, how can we overcome some of those barriers? It just was a great story about how we leverage those assets. And so, the community made a 10-year commitment to provide access, right, our best-in-class internet access to the kids that are most vulnerable.
That's powerful. I love you sharing that story because it shows the number of different partners, speaks to your superpower, right,
Yep.
of partnerships, but also talks to the different organizations that needed to come together, and how that can make an impact. Shifting to the current situation, right,
Yeah.
which is COVID, and in an era where we'll be social distancing more, and having digital learning is even more important. Can you talk about the role CO.LAB is playing in the ecosystem right now to help combat the impact of COVID?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sergio. And I think, um, CoLab, along with all of our partners in the city, have really, shifted some of our core work to focus on the immediate things that need to be done. And so, as an ecosystem player in Chattanooga, we have our hands in a lot of different things. We've been a part of that discussion around how to help kids get internet service right to their homes. We were part of a subcommittee that was started by the mayor to put out emergency funds, $2.5 million to small businesses that were impacted by COVID. So these are barbershops and beauty salons and restaurants, all of the things that were affected by the immediate executive orders that were put in place back in March and April. And why is that important? It's because we know that restaurants may carry less than 2 weeks of cash, which means if they have to shut down for 2 weeks, these are not the type of businesses that are flush with cash and can withstand 6 months, like we try to get a lot of people to do, right? These are businesses that require turning the restaurant every day, and inventory management, and all of those things. And so the money that was put out by the city, and we were part of helping that money, identifying companies and vetting and all of that. That money came out before PPP money hit people's bank accounts. That money came out before EIDL money or even state money was made available. And you're talking a few $1,000s for several hundred businesses. But that really allowed businesses to stay open until the end of April, early May, when they started getting their PPP money. Other things that we work with, we understand that there is an exorbitant amount of pressure on minority-owned businesses, and so we are working on some capacity building programs for minority-owned businesses. businesses, in fact, that really run great when everything's going well, but need a little extra support to manage through this incredible and unprecedented downturn that we're seeing in the market. And then there are little things that we did, like working with the state and the ECD agency at the state to get touchless thermometers so companies have greater confidence when they open their doors that they could test for staff and patrons in terms of their temperature. And so those are a number of the things that we've been working on. In terms of our normal programming, our co-starter programming, we're offering that free to everybody for the entire summer. So these are for people that are, trying to turn their business from the back of an envelope into something that's real and getting their first conversation with customers. And then our accelerator programs have become fully virtual, but we've had a high level of engagement. And again, our corporate partners that support our accelerators have been incredible in making themselves available to companies on a virtual basis.
That's it. That's unbelievable, and you guys have been resilient, and enjoy hearing about the role you all are playing, and not only make it through the crisis, but also the systemic change. You had mentioned, speaking of systemic change, we mentioned now we're paying more attention to the inequity in our system. So we talk about representation in all different areas of underrepresented women and underrepresented founders, but particularly the Black community. Can you talk about, can you give a little light to what CO.LAB, has done around the death of George Floyd, and really now taking advantage that the nation is paying attention to
Yeah.
to a longstanding problem. Like what are you guys doing, and how do we move forward from here?
So I think it's a challenging time for people all over the country to think about how do they collect their feelings and channel those feelings into something that's actionable. Um, we have an incredibly diverse organization that is done by design to reflect our values. Our values are a maker mentality. So, having a strong sense of creativity, whether you're starting a lemonade stand or you're, building a risk analytics company. Um, our second is really around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We want everybody that comes through our doors to feel like they have a place at CO.LAB. And that's probably what we take more seriously than anything else. That our doors are open. They're, you don't need to make an appointment. When we have moved to this remote way of working, we now are making outbound calls to companies, even people that we haven't really worked with before. We just say, how can we help you? What do you need? Who can we connect you with? Have you applied for city funds? Have you applied for PPP? Do you need help? How can we connect and take some of the burden off of business owners, particularly small business owners, right? And then I think the third point of our value system is really around selfless ecosystem building. And so a big part of what we've done during COVID is connect people again with resources that they either never knew about on the small business or entrepreneur side, and institutions where we have great relationships. We're bringing them to people and letting them know about the stories of what we're seeing in the market. And that's created some really unique opportunities where, we've even had individuals that, have means through partnerships like the Community Foundation open themselves up and provide funding for entrepreneurs and small businesses that needed funding due to the COVID era.
That's exciting. And what do you think we need to do going forward? I mean, I know you worked at MLT, and for those that don't know, it focuses on increasing diversity, especially in the of underrepresented folks in executive positions. So I know there's different programs. One is an MBA programs. That's the one I went through, and then they have programs at the college, and then also the executive level. But what do you think we need to do to better support entrepreneurs, women and entrepreneurs of color in the startup space?
So I'll start at a high level. If I can start at the 30,000 foot level, in this case, which I think is really important, the first thing that we as a country and really as a globe need to do is to understand that every human being is valuable. right? Years ago when I was in the world of finance, right, we had an economist that came in and he says, look, there's only two factors in GDP, productivity and population growth, right? And the more people that you can enfranchise in growth opportunities, that's the easiest way to move growth, right? So if you think we're a $20 trillion economy today, right? What happens? Imagine what we could be if you take, all the Black, Latino, Native American people that traditionally are not enfranchised in some of the corporate opportunities as well as the entrepreneurial opportunities, right? We all know the statistics on capital made available. What if we invested in those people and let them fulfill their potential as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as great stewards in society? We could go from 20 trillion to what number? And I know the number's much bigger than 20 trillion, right? And so that's the 30,000-foot level. The economics says invest in people that can get stuff done. And guess what? Everybody's capable of it if you give them a chance. So as we take that down and go to what's more actionable, I think a lot of the things people talk about, access to capital is incredibly important. Access to the right type of capital is even more important, right? So I think educating entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs of color, who oftentimes may say, "I can't afford to lose," because if I lose right out the gate, I'll never get another chance at this because I'm risking everything I got right now. And so, how do we de-risk that proposition by offering them support and the right type of capital to help them grow at a pace that allows them to take incremental more risk as folks move on? I think there's also an element of being really intentional about the way that we hire people on the investment side, right? So I think we need more representation, among GPs and even LPs that are saying diversity's got to be a part of our investment criteria, and it's how we're going to measure our success in addition to just our pure financial returns. And then I think the third part is the confidence, right? We've got to get people to have a lot of confidence that they can be successful and embrace risk and uncertainty, knowing that people have their back and that everybody's going to get behind them and do everything that we can to help move them forward.
That's amazing. And do you have any insights specifically since you're based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, uh, and uh, and there may be a lot of support systems right in on the coast, right where there's more capital. So you think of the Bostons, the New Yorks, the San Franciscos, that historically have been epicenters of venture capital and
Yeah.
angel investing. What more can we do to elevate cities like Chattanooga?
Well, I think there's part of it is be opportunistic. Um, the world I come from, you know, value investing is valuable, right? Ask Warren Buffett. If you believe that there's a dearth of opportunity in the middle of the country, and you believe that it's worth taking a trip to a place like Chattanooga or Birmingham or Nashville or even Montgomery, Alabama, right? Because you believe that there's some assets there that you can build, strong companies around and help entrepreneurs grow in those markets, then you got to get there, right? And you got to meet the people there and understand the culture. One of the best movies I've ever seen is Something Venture, right? And talks about essentially how Silicon Valley and the world of venture capital was built out in the Bay, 50 or 60 years ago. The big takeaway from that is there was nothing inherently special about San Francisco back then, right? It was engineers and orange groves. And, the benefit is there were some people that wanted to take risks and they brought money from New York out to San Francisco to, essentially make some of the first venture investments in kind of the modern era. In 2020, the San Francisco of the 1950s and 60s could be Chattanooga, could be Nashville, it could be Greenville, South Carolina, right? It can be any place where there are people that are willing to take risks. And now the people from the coast just got to get there. Steve Case is doing a fantastic job of this with the Rise of the Rest team. They came to Chattanooga in 2018, and just to put it in perspective, the company that won $100,000 their Freightways, which is, I like to call it a Bloomberg for freight and logistics. Again, kind of paying some homage to the fact that we have this incredible freight and logistics network. Craig Fuller won $100,000 from Rise of the Rest in May of 2018. Last week, he announced his $37 million B series round. Right? They have raised now over $75 million and are doing an incredible job. They're one of the top, fastest growing kind of tech companies in the state of Tennessee. And that happens because an investor comes from the coast and says, let me see what's happening in a place like Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Love it. I think that's a ode to many investors that are looking for deals and opportunities and the best investments, and in looking at different cities and ecosystems, such as Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I know before I said, shifting to, I guess, a different note. What is next for Marcus and CO.LAB?
Yeah. So we've got a lot of exciting stuff that we're working on. We hope that 2021 looks a little bit more normal than 2020, and that we can go back to our in-person accelerators and get people really coming through Chattanooga and leveraging some of these relationships that we were able to build even in the virtual era. This year was formally our 10th year. We're looking to have a big 10-year gala, but I think we're going to postpone that, obviously, until 2021. And so, we want to celebrate the 10 years of impact that we've had in Chattanooga. Some other things that I'm really excited about are that people throughout the Southeast are starting to now work together and build on some of the collective impact that we're having in our regional communities. And so there's an initiative, Monique Vila, who actually was with Core VC out in LA for a number of years, and has recently moved to Chattanooga and is now a principal at Mucker Capital, is in Nashville, is doing some incredible work with an initiative called Built in the Southeast. And it's really about highlighting ecosystems like Chattanooga and Tampa and Atlanta, where people are doing incredible work, and how do we leverage the insights and wins from all of these other Southeast communities to build more regional strength throughout our region of the country.
Great. Well, thank you, Marcus, for joining us tonight at Rebel One Live and sharing your story and insight on not only the company lab, but also the ecosystem in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This is Rebel One Live, where we're highlighting amazing CEOs and investors like Marcus every week. So please join us at 7 p.m. Eastern. And thanks again for joining us, Marcus.
Thanks so much.